Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre. In today's video, I've got a couple of stories from relationships that are simply just no. The first one is going to be quick and short, and then we're going to move on to the main story, which is a bit longer and has a couple of updates. So let's not waste any time and get started with the first story. This one is from user Throwaway Condom. I've been with my soon-to-be fiancé for 2 years. We met in college and just hit it off from there. However, something weird happens when we get passionate. She never gets intimate with me if I wear a condom. She always wants me to go raw, and I'm worried because she isn't on birth control. Last night, I tried putting on a condom and she yelled at me and said I wasn't a real man and that only sissies wear condoms. It was really weird, and I wonder if some women are insulted if a man wears condoms during passionate time. I have no idea why she's acting like this. She's only started this way 2 months ago. That was OP's original post, so now let's go on with an update. So my curiosity got the better of me and I checked her phone while she went to the store. I looked through her text messages and saw an exchange with her friend on the phone. In the text messages, my significant other talks about how she doesn't want to lose me and how I have way too many options compared to her. She talks about how jealous she feels when other girls try and flirt with me. My SO and her friend discuss trying to get her pregnant so I won't leave her. I'm really not ready for kids at all, and it makes it really uncomfortable that my SO would want to trick me into getting her pregnant. When my SO came back, she immediately tried to initiate some passionate time, but I refused. It then blew up into an argument. She started talking about how I didn't love her and that I've been distant lately. In a fit of anger, I let it slip that I went through her phone and I knew she was trying to trap me. Things only went downhill from there and devolved into a shouting match. I left the house and packed up most of my things. I don't think to stay with her is worth my time anymore, and she kept trying to gaslight and manipulate me. My phone is still blowing up from text messages saying that she loves me and she wants me to take her back, but I'm not buying it. That really sucks. OP's ex's insecurities got the best of her and ended up blowing up the relationship. In the first post, he referred to her as his soon-to-be fiancé. And now they're broken up and they're probably very much over because he's not buying into anything that she has to say. So good for you, OP. Run as fast as you can from somebody that tries to baby trap you. Alright, and now let's move on to the main story. This one is from user Icy Warp. I, 35 male, think that my wife, 33 female, is cheating on me and has been for many years. We've been together for 14 years. We've been married for almost 10 years and have a 5-year-old daughter together. Incident 1. When my wife and I were in college, where we first started dating, we had an incident where she had some really graphic texts from a guy we both knew from school. She even had classes with him. I confronted her about the texts. I definitely didn't handle it well and basically accused her straight out of the gate as cheating on me without realizing there were some possible outs for her. One of those outs was that she claimed that they were just some pervy texts that she got from this guy out of the blue, and that if I had paid any attention when I was snooping through her phone, that she hadn't actually responded to them. At the time, I conceded that I may have overlooked that possibility, and I had overreacted. She apologized to me for not mentioning to me that some guy was hitting on her like that, and I apologized for overreacting and snooping. We moved on from there. Fast forward to this last year. My daughter, wife, and I are at the gas station. I can tell my wife is kind of distant and detached from the interactions my daughter and I are having. I noticed she's glued to her phone as well. The gas fill in our car is on the passenger side, and I have the rear passenger door open so I can tickle my daughter while I wait for the car to fill up. I'm really suspicious of what my wife is doing at this point, so I decide that I'm gonna take a look over my wife's shoulder from the back seat at what it is she's so caught up in. Turns out, she is actively, in the moment, intimately texting some guy, like, Words, descriptions, acts that very much seem like they've been doing this a while, and looking back with 2020 hindsight, I'm fairly certain they had been sleeping together as well. Also, all the stuff she was texting was super graphic. Stuff that she never used with me, either in dirty talk or when we got intimate. And I know this next admission is pathetic and that it shouldn't matter more than anything else, but the fact that she wanted to share in these acts with this man instead of me really freaking hurt. Probably just my pride talking, but it is what it is. So fast forward 10 minutes when we get home, and I have to suffer through smiling during dinner and the whole nighttime ritual of getting our daughter to bed so as not to cause a scene by blowing up at my wife for what I had seen her texting. Honestly, that was probably a blessing because it allowed me to collect my thoughts before confronting her. I ended up telling my wife what I saw at the gas station, and right off the bat she tries to play dumb. "What are you talking about? Honey, you're making no sense." I told her not to play dumb with me, and I recited some of the texts that I could remember back to her to prove that I saw what I saw. She then goes on to admit that it was a mistake, but that it was 100% nothing physical and that she was really sorry. She admitted that the guy was a work colleague. We talked a lot that night about why she felt she needed to be doing that. A lot of it boiled down to her feeling depressed and lonely. We talked about strategies that we could invoke at home, things that we both could change to help mend the rift. I guess things felt kind of okay after that, but it felt like the damage to our trust was already done. I don't think I've ever really recovered. Even that seemingly small moment of infidelity, assuming that was only texts, was just such a freaking hammer to my heart. Ever since that incident from last year, I've been waking up every day as a lesser version of my former self. My emotions and propensity to feel anything have been severely muted. Interacting with my daughter is about the only thing that gets me back close to a baseline of how I remember my former self. But beyond those precious moments, I'm just a walking, grayed out zombie that puts on a good face for pretty much everything for my day to day. Going to work, interaction with my wife, etc. Most recent incident number 3. Now, fast forward to yesterday. My wife has been gone on a week-long work trip to the East Coast. We're West Coast. I actually had zero suspicions or justifiable reasons to be worried for this trip, because things had been going pretty well between us and she hadn't really given off any indicators of suspicious behavior. But my first clue was that when she arrived at her destination, she couldn't get the Wi-Fi working for FaceTime. And this stayed true for the entirety of her trip. First of all, FaceTime works on cellular data just fine, which we have a ridiculous amount of. I explained that to her without much of a response. Second, I know that if I were gone for a week from my family, it would be my biggest priority to get FaceTime up and running so that I could see my family's faces every time I called to visit, which would be every single night. Which brings me to the next point. She called us in the evening to say goodnight maybe 2 times out of the 7 days that she was gone. Based on previous trips she's had, this was really strange. Normally, she is like clockwork touching in with us to share her day and to hear from us about our day. And again, always on FaceTime. I asked her about that and she claimed that she was just too tired in the evenings to get back to us. Also, in the past, if she was away from me or home, she would always text me goodnight and said that she loved me, even if we had previously chatted moments earlier on FaceTime or via phone call. For this recent trip, she never texted me once. So, when she got back, my radar was on high alert. Now, I don't feel good about this next part, but when she went to sleep that night, I checked her travel bag to see if my suspicions were correct. Sure enough, to my surprise, she keeps this little red book as a diary in her work bag. I open it up, and there is a date marked. Turns out she started writing a poem on that day about our daughter, who had just been born the previous fall. Okay, that's really sweet, I say to myself, and I start to feel bad about my snooping. Flip to the next page and there's a new entry. There's no date, but it's written sequentially right after the aforementioned poem, so I know that what I described here is an entry that came after our daughter being born. This non-dated entry starts off with her describing how much she longs for this specific person. Doesn't give his name. She goes on to talk about how she can't stop thinking about him. Every man she sees reminds her of him. She talks about how she never really intended for things to go very far, but that one night that started in the bar and ended up going upstairs just felt too right to not be something meaningful. She goes on to say that she doesn't feel bad about making that decision in regard to how it impacts her other life. She describes how she thinks maybe her other life was the mistake. This goes on for pages. That entry ends with her making peace with herself that he moved on from her and it was time for her to forget about him. I am assuming that her other life was our daughter and me. There was only one more entry after that previous one. I took pictures of it and have typed it out here in its entirety. I'm laughing to myself because I haven't opened this book in over 2 years, and here I am, sitting in his bed, in his room at his home, still feeling angst over so many of the same things. I'll go home after having a week with him and I'll be asking the same questions. Is he ever going to call again after? Was it so stupid to go on this trip? So funny how I thought we'd never speak again, and look where I am. We worked together, we talked almost every day, and he was there for me as a friend. Now, here I am, and back with questions. Why were we so hot and cold those first couple of days and then just tapered off? Maybe he's doing that moral compass wrestling, and after I leave, we'll never speak again. This trip was probably a bad idea, but we had a lot of fun. And he did say he'd been looking forward to it. He missed me. He wanted this. I know that. I wish he would just tell me he wants me. Just me and always me. It's like we dance around things because he still wants us to have this thing happening despite the rest of my life, and I just don't want to talk about that. To the point that I'm lying, and I hate lying to him. But meanwhile, every tender moment I have with him is so precious, I can't believe it. I couldn't imagine we'd actually be snuggling on the couch, and there we were. I haven't slept since reading that last full entry. I haven't confronted her yet either. It's been almost 48 hours now without sleep, and I'm just an emotional wreck. I just don't know how to handle this situation. I guess I've gotten so good at wearing this zombie mask ever since incident number 2 happened that I've been able to limp through the last couple of days, but it's getting really hard to be around her. I hopped online and read some guides on how to deal with infidelity, and most of the guides mentioned therapy, so I'm going to look into that tomorrow. Just filing for divorce isn't so simple. My wife has a serious seizure disorder that is uncontrolled. She can't tell when they're happening, so that puts herself, and possibly others, small kids especially, our daughter to be exact, in danger. I mention this as it pertains to custody. Imagine she's making dinner for her and my daughter one evening and she has a seizure near the stovetop and the house catches on fire? Well, the only adult in the house is lying on the floor unconscious. What if my daughter has a medical emergency, but then my wife has a seizure due to the stress of the situation? These are all very real possibilities and ones that I fear could happen if she got custody in any way. Some of those examples aren't too far off from other real-life incidents we've had over the years due to her seizure disorder. She obviously can't drive. Would this factor into a custody dispute? I mean, our daughter is starting kindergarten in a month. How could my wife transport her? I don't know what I'm looking for with this whole rambling post. Maybe just assurance that her gaslighting isn't working? That what I've described isn't the workings of an overly paranoid mind? I feel like one minute I'm ready to file for divorce, and then the next I want to try to salvage things for the sake of our daughter, and just to avoid the awful mess that will be made of all 3 of our lives if we end up separating. Well, this whole story kind of breaks my heart. I feel really bad for OP. To me, it's kind of clear that she's definitely cheating on him and he's just trying to hang on to hopes and, maybe staying together for his daughter. And I just kind of overall feel bad for him because I think he's in some sort of denial. In any case, I'm not gonna go with a long commentary and we're just gonna move on to the updates. There's 2 of them, so hang tight. I met with my lawyer this morning and she was great. She gave me a lot of confidence that I felt was draining away from me throughout the week as I waited to confront. I also had a good friend that was my rock throughout the week, and I will never be able to thank him enough. I ended up confronting my wife right after the meeting with the lawyer. I refused to give up any of my evidence. I just said, I know about the other guy, I need you to talk about it. I just kept repeating that line while she went through crocodile tears and confusion about what I was talking about. It was so freaking hard not giving up any of that information, but I knew that I had all the power in that situation. In the end, she never confessed. I basically moved the conversation from there by saying, well, it doesn't matter if you admit to what I already know or not. Because the intimate texting that you did last year was enough to destroy any trust I had in you. I can no longer live like this. From there, she just kind of shut down and became pretty docile. And never brought back up this outrageous thing I was falsely accusing her of. We pretty quickly moved into business-like details about what to do in the short term. Her dad came over and picked her up and gave me a hug and said, let us know if you need anything. I teared up right at that moment. I'm not letting my guard down yet because anything can happen, but I think things may work out for the better for everyone involved. That was the first update. Now let's move on to the second and final update, which is 4 months later from this first update. Things are actually pretty good right now. We obviously separated after I confronted her. She still hasn't admitted to anything. We sold the house, and now I've got an apartment with my daughter, more about custody later. I'm actually having a blast making the space my own, and it's nice having my own time to myself again. I do have to say, I thought the loneliness would fade a bit faster, but that's still pretty sharp. I've started working out a lot, and I've also gotten back into writing and recording music, which I haven't done in years. As far as my ex goes, I decided to keep things as amicable as I could for my daughter's sake. And I think it's the single best decision I've made throughout all of this BS. By allowing myself to feel all of the emotions I needed to feel before confronting her, I was able to keep rational and calm throughout all of this. And it's really made all of the difference. I can't imagine how awful things would have been on an emotional, legal, and custodial level had I just blown everything up when I confronted her. I've confided in a few close friends about the truth of the situation, just because I needed someone to talk about all of the BS to make sure I was acting accordingly. But beyond that, no other family knows the situation. To everyone else, we just separated for amicable reasons. Her mom in particular is taking things pretty hard. I feel bad for her. She is struggling to understand what happened, but that's on my ex to tell her, not me. For custody, while we wait for the divorce to finalize, is that I get my daughter Monday through Friday since I am the only one that can drive her to school. My ex gets her Saturdays and Sundays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. My ex's seizures are predominantly in the evening, and it's just not safe for our daughter to be there with her on her own. At least not until she's older. We're gonna work that out and get those details in writing at some point. Anyway, I'm feeling about 60% good and about 40% freaked the F out now that I'm on my own. At 36, I have no idea how to approach the dating scene, and my confidence is a bit shot to hell right now. I mean, for F's sake, I haven't given serious consideration to another woman in over 14 years, so I'm probably just gonna wait for 3 to 4 months while I get to know myself again, get in better shape, and see how I feel after that. Not try to put too much pressure on myself to find someone again. Wow, that was a trip, the whole thing. I'm happy OP's life is kind of turning around for the better, and he's removed this toxic person in an amicable way, you know, for his daughter's sake, from his life. He seems to be acting incredibly mature, and I'm guessing he's getting some therapy to help out with that. I can totally understand his confidence being shot after you've been with somebody you love for 14 years only to realize she's always been cheating on you. That's just horrible in so many different levels, but it's good overall that he's on his way to being great. So all I can do now, OP, is wish you the best for what's coming up, and I hope you can lead a happy and fulfilling life. Alright, well, we've reached the end of the video. If you liked it, go ahead and click like I always ask you to do. If you haven't subscribed yet and you do like the content, then just subscribe. It's right there, and you know, you'll always be notified when I put out new content. And don't forget to visit the Lost Genre subreddit, where you can cross-post stories that you'd like for me to feature in any video. Alright, and having said all that, I'll see you guys on the next video.